All right, so for this video, we're going to be going over a method of solving quadratic equations called completing the square. Up until now, you have two methods of solving quadratic. The first method is to use factoring. So we can factor the left side as long as the right side says equal to 0. We can factor what's on the left and find our two solutions that way. Or you can use a graphing calculator. You can use the graph. You can look to see for the x-intercepts. So there's two more ways of solving a quadratic equation. One is called completing the square, and the other one's called the quadratic formula. This one is kind of different. Kind of uses factoring within the method. So if you're good at factoring, you should have no problem with this. So here's an equation. We have a couple different options for how we can solve this. For right now, you would probably subtract the 36 from both sides to get this to be a 0. All right, and if you subtracted 36 from both sides, this left side is going to be an x squared plus a 6x. Holy cow. Plus a 6. Let's go back and just try this again. X squared plus 6x minus, what is this going to be, 27 equals 0. Okay, and that's something you can factor then, because you can do this as plus 9 and minus 3, x plus 9, x minus 3. And so your two solutions will be a negative 9 and a positive 3. All right. You can do this a different method, though. The way we're going to do it is called completing the square. What we're going to do is we're not going to move the 36 over. We're going to let it there. What we're going to do is we're going to factor the left-hand side as it sits right now. And now I have this equation set up perfectly so that the correct numbers are here to do this. But if you factored the left side, you look for factors of 9 that add to 6. That's 3 and 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to write this as x plus 3 to the second power, because that's what the left side factors into. And on the right side, we're just going to leave our 36 there. All right, and now what you have is you have the entire left side is to a power of 2. All right, and we can get rid of this power of 2 by doing it's technically called its inverse operation, which is called square root. All right, so we're going to square root both sides to get rid of that 2. And we did say this earlier, but when you square root a number, you can have a positive or a negative. So the square root of 36 is either positive 6 or negative 6. Or you could use the word and, so it's positive 6 and it's negative 6. So we got to be careful over there on the right side. But on the left side, our square root and our power of 2 cancel out. So we just have an x plus 3 left. And on our right side, when we square root 36, we get 6. But you do have to keep this little plus minus symbol in front of the 6 to show that you have two options. It could be positive 6 or it could be negative 6. All right, and then our last step, if we're solving for x, is we have to get rid of this 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. Why did I put an equal sign there? So subtract 3 from both sides. We get x equals, then we get positive or negative 6 minus 3. And you might be thinking, what does that mean? Well, it means you have two solutions. And the first solution, holy cow, that's a big highlighter. The first solution is what happens if it's positive 6 minus 3. So you just kind of look at this stuff. What is positive 6 minus 3? Positive 6 minus 3 is 3. And then you look at, okay, well, what if the 6 was a negative? And you do negative 6 minus 3. What is that? That is negative 9. All right, and so there's your two solutions you would get. That is called completing the square, and if you remember, those are the same two solutions you would have gotten if you factored it. All right, I had this example made perfectly to do it this way. So there are some other steps that it involves sometimes to get it set up this way, but the general idea is here. So you have to factor the left side. It does have to factor into the same thing twice. Why? Because you have to get this power of 2 here, so that we can get rid of it by doing the square root. That's called completing the square. So let's go through a couple of examples here. Let's go through a couple of factoring examples. Factor these. These are all what we call perfect square trinomials. It means that they are the same factor twice. All right, so when we use completing the square, you're going to want to write these with the power of 2 on the outside instead of writing out both the factors. All right, so again, these are called perfect square trinomials, and it just means that you have the same factor twice. And and to do completing the square method, you have to write them like this. You have to write the factor with a squared after it. All right, So here we go. So what value of c would make each trinomial a perfect square trinomial? Well, the way we can think of this to start is, what do my two factors have to be if they add to 10? So what two numbers add to 10 and that are the same number? The answer is 5. All right, so this isn't the answer, but that means that I have to have x plus 5, x plus 5. That's the only way I can get this to add to 10. So I have to pick 5 and 5. And so then to find c, I have to multiply my 5 times my 5. And that would get me 25. So you kind of work, I guess you could say you work backwards, find the factors, and then multiply the two numbers together and figure out what c would have to be. So in this case, your factors would have to be x minus 3. All right, because -3 plus -3 would make -6. And then to make that factor, you would have to have the c as -3 times -3, which is a positive 9. So keep in mind, all these numbers are going to have to be positive. All right, because even if we have a factor with a -3, such as this, when I multiply -3 by itself, it turns to positive because a negative times negative makes a positive. All right, so instead of writing the factors out for this one, we're just going to figure it out. Again, we're taking half of 16 to figure out what the number in the factor is. So that's 8. So I know this is going to be x plus 8. And then to find c, I have to just multiply my 8 and my 8 together to make a 64. So this one's going to be 64. And so what we're doing is we're taking that b term, which in the example that I just did is the 16. We're taking the b term. We're finding half of it, okay? So b over 2, that finds half of it. That finds my 8. That tells me that this should factor into x plus 8, x plus 8. And then I have to multiply it by itself. So then I have to square it. So this is kind of your formula for finding what number needs to be c in order to factor it correctly for the completing the square method. So in this case, we're going to get a decimal because half of 5 is 2.5. Okay. And then we have to square that to figure out what c is. So 2.5 squared. Why should I feel like I should know this? 5.25 or something like that. Let's go calculator. Make sure we don't mess this up. 2.5 times 2.5. 6.25. Wow. I am not good at math. 6.25. So C would have to be 6.25. All right, so that's how you pick the number that you need. Let's next this slide. There we go. So here's your steps. All right, and these should be written down for you already. We're going to go through this example using the completing the square method. And the first thing to do is to take the constant term, which is our c, basically, and move it to the right. So our c is 9, so we're going to take that, we're going to move it to the right. And this kind of seems, I guess, counterproductive. But it's not always going to be the correct number here. So 9 is the correct number. It's the number that I need to factor this correctly. But it's not always going to be right. So if you follow these steps every time, you'll make sure that you solve this correctly. So we're going to move the 9 out of the way. And what that leaves me an x squared plus 6x. And then my 9's not there anymore. It moved to the right and got combined with my 36. So 36 minus 9 is 27. Okay, and then step 2 says make sure that a equals 1. If not, divide the whole equation by a. Forget about that. In this video, we're not going to do anything that doesn't have a equals 1. So pretend that's not there. Step 3 says add b over 2 squared to both sides of the equation. So that means I'm going to have to put the number here that I have to use to factor this into the same thing twice. So again, remember, my goal here is to get x plus something squared, which means I have to factor this, make sure I get the same factor twice. In order to do that, remember we talked about this in the last slide, I have to add half of b squared to both sides. Well, half of b, b is 6, half of b is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So I have to put a 9 here. All right, and you may not have recognized that the 9 was already there from the start. You probably wouldn't recognize that from the first step, so it's okay if you move the 9 and then you had to put a 9. But what's really important is that when you put the 9 here, you have to put a 9 here. All right, because you can't just add a number to one side of an equation and not add it to the other side. That would make it completely unbalanced. So we got to add this on both sides of our equation. Now we can factor the left side. So what multiplies to 9 adds to 6. 3 and 3. So that has to factor into the same thing twice so that you can write it like this. And the right side is going to be 36. And then it says tip number 5, square root both sides and continue solving. So we square root both sides. All right, on the left side, we have an x plus 3. And on the right side, you might be inclined to write a 6. It is 6, but it could be positive or negative 6. All right, so you got to put that plus minus. Both of those are options. And then the last step, which I think is technically on the next slide here. Let's see if we can keep the text and next to the slide. Oh, it's not. We're just going to finish this off then. So then we would subtract 3 from both sides. And our two solutions would be pretend it's positive 6. So positive 6 minus 3 is 3. And then pretend it's negative 6. So it's negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9. I don't know why I'm saying pretend because it actually is positive 6 and negative 3. Or positive 6 and negative 6. So let's just... Yeah, all right. So next example here. Oh, wow, this video is getting long. Step 1, take the 11, get it out of the way. So let's move the 11 over the other side. So let's subtract 11 over the other side. What does that give us? Gives us x squared minus 12x, and then a negative 11 over here. And again, I'm leaving a space here because my next step is to put something there. And the something that I'm putting here, all right, let's draw an arrow. What goes here? Half of b, because that tells me what the factor is going to be. And then I have to square it. All right, so what number does that get me? Well, b is negative 12. And negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. And negative 6 squared is positive 36. Remember, these numbers that you're adding to both sides should always be positive. All right, so we found out the number that we need here is a 36. So we're going to put a 36 there. And we're going to make sure we put the 36 on the other side at the same time. All right, remember, you can't add something to one side of the equation if we don't add it to the other side of the equation. All right, so now we're ready to factor. So we're going to factor our left side. So what multiplies to 36 adds to negative 12? Negative 6 and negative 6. So we're going to write it as like this, x minus 6 squared. And on the right side, we're going to combine our negative 11 and our 36 to get a 25. All right, we got most of the hard work done. Now we're going to go ahead and try to get rid of our power of 2, and we're going to do that by square rooting both sides. All right, so when I square root both sides, I just get rid of my 2. So now I just have this x minus 6 left here. And when I square root 25, I'll get a positive or a negative 5. All right, almost last step, add a 6 to get x by itself. Okay, and so what do we get? We get x equals positive or negative 5 plus 6. All right, and so we got to actually write what those two numbers are. So again, I'll use my highlighter here. Positive 5 plus 6. Positive 5 plus 6. What's that? That's 11. All right, so one of our solutions is 11. And then I think of what would I get if it was a negative 5. All right, so negative 5 plus 6. What's negative 5 plus 6? 1. So that means our other solution is a 1. And so there's our two answers. X equals 11 and x equals 1. All right. And a common thought in this situation is to say, why didn't we just use the factoring method? You know, that's simple enough, right? Factoring would be factor this x minus 1, x minus 11. And then you would know your solutions are positive 1 and positive 11, and you'd have been done. You'd have had your answers, right? Why did I do all this extra garbage, you might think it is? Well, in these examples, yes, if you had an option, we would definitely want to factor this because it would be way faster. However, sometimes you can't factor the equation, and you need another method to use when you can't factor. All right, so this comes in handy. Let's see, do I have one more example? Yeah, let's do this one. Last one. All right, so we're going to take our 15, move it out of the way. All right, so that gives me x squared minus 16x, and again, leave some space there because you're going to put a number there. And we subtracted our 15. All right, so we left space because we got to put our number that we need right here. And the number that you need there half of b and square that number. Well, what does that get us? Well, b is negative 16. Half of negative 16 is negative 8, and negative 8 squared is positive 64. Again, always positive. When you take a negative number and you square it, it's always positive. So make sure when you're typing this in the calculator, you put these parentheses are important. You must put them around your negative number and square it. If you don't, then you just put negative 8 squared in your TI-83 graphing calculator. It's going to tell you negative 64. But you are smarter than the calculator because you know that this is not correct. All right, so when you square a negative number, it's always positive. So we're going to take the 64, and that's the number that needs to be here so that I can factor this the way I want to. All right, if I put a 64 on the left, got to put it on the right. There we go. Okay, and so what do we get here on the left side? We get an x minus 8 to the power of 2. And on the right side, I get a, what does this get me, 49? Negative 15 plus 64 is 49. All right, you're going to square root both sides. That leaves me with x minus 8. And on this side, leaves me with a positive or a negative 7. And then my last step, if I don't have this stuff down here, to add an 8 to both sides. And so we get our answer is positive or negative 7, and then added 8 to it. All right, and so find your two solutions from there. Again, positive 7 plus 8. What's positive 7 plus 8? That's 15. And then what is, don't do the same color. And then what is negative 7 plus 8? Negative 7 plus 8 is 1. And so there's your two solutions, 15 and 1. All right, I think that's all I want to do. We'll do that at a later time. Thanks for